there is no work to do for this question. You need to recognize instantly that they're asking for the slope, and this is a line written in y equals mx plus b format. So it's pretty close to that. The only difference is, look what they did. They integrated the x with the slope, and they can do that because what's really happening, right, is we have a number before the x, and that number can be written as a fraction, but also x can be written as a fraction. So what they really did here is the slope is 5/13. So we would probably just write this as 5/13 x minus 23, but it's x over 1. So 5 over 13 times x over 1 is 5x over 13. So that's how that x can kind of get into the slope, and also how we can separate it out. Just realizing it's just an x, guys. It doesn't really have any other special properties. So my advice at this point is enter 5/13 into the spot here, the grid in spot. Now, you might know in Blue Book that they're giving you lots of instructions about how these student-produced response questions work. My advice is always use the fraction if you can, because fractions are nice and easy. They're finite, right? We're only going to use the spaces needed for that fraction, and this is just 4 spots. We've got 5 spots if we need them, including the slash. So this is only 4. But if we start to go to the calculator here, right? Here, I'll even just do it in Desmos. 5/13, if we put that in the calculator, is a messy decimal. And this is where people lose points with the student-produced responses without realizing it, because you can't just round wherever you want. If you're going to put a decimal in, you have to go as far as you can. So there's a couple answers that would, in my opinion, be acceptable here. So one of them is 0.3846. There are 5 spots for positive numbers that we need to use in these student-produced response questions. That's 5 spots. The decimal is 1, 3, 8, 4, 6. 5 spots. Now, we're also allowed to round. So in this case, it wouldn't really matter, but the 1 that comes after the 6, that would keep it as a 6. But if it were like a 7, then we could round the 6 up to a 7. Or better yet, if we needed to round the 6, we could also round it at that point, but only at the last possible spot are you allowed to round it. You can't round randomly. You have to round as far as it goes. Now, the reason I don't like this method either is, what if I wanted to use 0 in front? That takes up an extra space. So now 0.384 is acceptable, right? Because that's still 5 spots, and I'm going as far as I can with the spots that I have. So in theory, this is also correct. But notice the 4 is followed by a 6. So if we rounded that, it should be 0.385, and I think also that's acceptable. And the reason that that's acceptable is when we have these repeating decimals or these kind of continuing decimals, we end up with the ability to either round the last number or to truncate and just chop it off wherever that ends. But you always have to go all the way to the end. If you just stop short and round at a random spot, you will get these wrong. So you got to be really careful. And the best way to avoid any of these problems is just put the fraction in. Now, if you have a decimal and you want to get it into a fraction, see how in Desmos here to the left of the fraction that I typed is this kind of like circle with 2 squares in it. Tap that, and it's going to turn your answer that's a decimal into a fraction. In this case, it's back to the fraction we started with, but if it were a messier thing, then we would be able to get a fraction answer. So remember, Desmos converts decimals to fractions for you. So use that opportunity as much as possible. I really think these are very risky to enter decimal answers unless it's a very easy decimal like 0.5, 3.1, something like that. If it's repeating forever, just see if you can do the fraction. Much safer.